Hey everyone, Howie here, and today on my jiu-jitsu video I'd like to talk about fat burning. So get prepared to see a lot of my face because I'm going to be talking quite heavily for this one. And I think I'd like to try and dispel some myths along the way, because I think even now when we have information at our fingertips and we can Google everything, I still think there's some massive misconceptions about fat burning or exercise in general. And maybe I would make a series about dispelling some of these myths and asking questions about what certain things are. But today I'd like to look at fat burning. And I want to keep it quite simple, but I also want to give you some details and let you know how this information can be useful and beneficial, so you can actually get something from this and something out of your training. Or if you're trying to lose weight and you're aspiring to be a certain shape or what have you, then fat burning has a massive importance. And I think a lot of people go about it the wrong way. I mean, that's my opinion. I will talk a little bit about my opinion and what I feel is the best approach to achieving your goals in terms of physique and fat burning. But let's get into it. Let's really get into the meat and potatoes of what fat burning is and how we can achieve it. So what do we know about fat to begin with? Well, one of the myths I want to first dispel is that eating fat makes you fat. Any excessive calories will be stored as fat, and this is true of fat, protein and carbohydrates. Although carbohydrates is generally, especially refined and processed carbohydrates, are the ones that generally get stored as fats. And that's the reason why a lot of these low carb, no carb, ketogenic diets are very popular by cutting carbs, is because it gets rid of don't want to say the main enemy, but it gets rid of one of the big players in terms of fat stores. But what is a fat store? Well, not saying that we're like a lot of other mammals, but we are mammals. A lot of other mammals will put on fat and blubber to hibernate, so they have these big fat stores to keep themselves alive when they don't have a lot. If they're in hibernation, then they're not hunting, they can't forage for food, so they need something to keep them going. And not saying we're the same, but the analogy is probably quite useful. The reason that we store fat is so that when we don't have times of plenty, we have something to fall back on to add to those calories that we are consuming to make sure that we stay alive. So essentially, stored fat is stored energy. It's energy for when we need it. And obviously, living in a world of abundance, for the most part, being in a first world country, we don't need to store all that fat. I mean, obviously there's a lot of dietary choices, and we are led to consume a lot more sugary products than perhaps we were even a few decades ago. I know that actually things have been put in place to lower sugar contents and the sugar tax and what have you, which actually from a dietary point of view is really good. But I think there's definitely a misunderstanding, as well as the person who was my trainer, who trained me to become a PT. He just said there's no such thing as bad sugar, just bad timing. Obviously, consuming too much of anything is bad, and sugar, it really can be the enemy because it does bad things to your teeth and other things as well. It has psychological impacts. But I digress. We really want to look at how we burn this fat. So we've looked at very briefly at how we store fat, just excess of calories. Now, to touch on that briefly again, when we start digesting food and we have increase in blood sugar and that insulin spike, if we do not use that energy over the course of a day or whatever the cycle may be, because it's never quite as straightforward as a day or what have you, but if you do not use that energy, that's when it gets stored. So if you are doing a lot of exercise, then it's less of an issue eating more refined sugars because you're burning them off a lot quicker. Or burning them before they get a chance to be stored is perhaps a better way to look at that. But a lot of people's problems arise from the fact that the fat has been stored. But what else do we know about fat? Well, I can tell you it's made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, I don't want to delve too much into the chemistry of things, but an interesting fact is that 84% of the fat, the actual mass of the fat, when it is burned, it becomes CO2. It is exhaled as invisible gas. And people don't seem to realise this, because only 16% of it is excreted from the body as water. And however that may be, there are different ways we can excrete water through sweat and other methods. But the vast majority of that fat, when it gets burned, gets turned into CO2, which is something else that people need to be aware of. I'll get to why in a little bit, but just hold that in your mind for now. So, to get rid of this fat, to get rid of this stored energy, you will have heard everybody say, well, the key to fat loss is eat less, move more, and that's essentially it. There isn't really much more to it. I mean, you can lose weight just by dieting because the mathematics is there. It's simply in and out, and as long as your input is less than your output, you're going to burn that fat away. You're going to use those energy stores. And the statistics show that it's roughly 70% to 30% in terms of diet to exercise respectively in terms of achieving your goals. So you can just lose weight by diet, but the combination of the two is going to make you achieve those goals quicker. And now fad dieting is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. And when I say fad dieting, I'm not necessarily talking about things like intermittent fasting or ketogenic diets, because I know that veganism, these are not fad diets. These are more lifestyle choices. Fad diets, I can't really think of a great example. Maybe things like the Atkins diet was popular at one point when I was younger, and all these kind of different diets kind of start showing up, and so necessarily saying things like Weight Watchers are bad, but a lot of these things that come along, juice dieting, what have you, they don't necessarily target the main problem, which should be, as I mentioned, it should be a lifestyle choice. Diet isn't about just losing weight over a short period of time. Diet should be what you're consuming. And something I try and do with my clients is I try and get them to change their diet through lifestyle choices and try and teach them how to eat healthier as a whole, as opposed to just going on fad diets. And there's another reason why I don't feel that dieting alone is the most effective, because you're cutting out that other 30%. And I do think that a lot of people who haven't been necessarily trained before will generally just go to the gym and just do half an hour on the running machine or an hour, or they'll just do a lot of cardio and maybe some low weight stuff, but mostly just a lot of cardio. And cardio is great, it is fantastic for losing weight, but I don't believe it's the best in terms of overall. And again, I'm going to talk about why in a little bit, once I've talked about the process of fat burning, because I've almost been dodging around the point at this time now. Well, the process that actually takes the fat, the subcutaneous fat, and turns it into energy is a process called lipolysis. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it is lipolysis that turns your fat into energy. So, knowing this, how can we get lipolysis to work for us? Well, the first thing we want to make sure of is that we're not inhibiting lipolysis, inhibiting it from happening. And the thing that inhibits lipolysis from happening is that thing I mentioned earlier, is insulin. So we want to make sure we keep that insulin response as low as possible. So this is the reason why the certain diets do choose to have low carbohydrates, because it does reduce that insulin spike. Protein and fat do produce an insulin spike, but it's a lot smaller because it takes a lot longer to digest and therefore get into your bloodstream, and therefore to have that hormonal response to then get the insulin to move that around your body to where it's needed. But what else? What is that and then activates it? What is that activates lipolysis? And again, that's hormonal, and it's normally glycogen. Sorry, glucagon. I'll get there. Glucagon. All these things sound very similar. I don't know, they're all factors, but glucagon is the hormone that is responsible for activating lipolysis, amongst many other things. And adrenaline or epinephrine is another one that helps produce that glucagon to instigate that lipolysis action. Well, now we know that, how do we produce this? What is the reaction that causes this hormonal response to then activate or instigate lipolysis? Well, funnily enough, if you hadn't already guessed, it's exercise. Well, amongst other things, but exercise is a fantastic way to get that to work, because if your blood sugar, or if there isn't enough energy in your blood, if there's not enough glucose in your bloodstream, then you need to get your energy from somewhere. And if you have a lot of fat reserves, that is where the energy is going to come from. And this is the reason why exercise is fantastic to help lose weight. And there's a whole thing about fat burning zones, and I could talk about that, but I think the thing that's most important, and the thing that's also important with diet as well, and I think that's most important about both of these things in terms of actually getting to your goals and achieving everything, is enjoying it. So the important thing about exercise, most important thing is that you enjoy it. And the most important thing about diet is that you enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep at it and you're not going to stick to it. And there is a certain degree of habit forming, and I know that if you stick at something long enough, you will start to enjoy it, because as you get better at things, you start to enjoy them more. That's the reason I enjoy jiu-jitsu. I got good at it. I enjoyed it for other reasons too, but you have to enjoy what you do, otherwise you're not going to stick at it. And I think that's the most, and that is the crucial thing, the crux of everything, is you really, really need to enjoy it. So now we've touched on that. So we if I was to summarize what we've learned so far, is that excess sugars, excess calories, if you will, get stored as fat for a later date, energy for a later date. Now, and when we exercise, we produce those hormones which will start to break down that fat into energy when we need that energy, if we haven't already got it in our bloodstream. So, what we need to now understand is how we can make this more efficient, if that's the right way to look at this. Now, like I said, a lot of people will just go and do cardio, and that is fine if that's what you enjoy. But I think for an effective, I think the term should really be body recomposition. I think a lot of people, when they talk about losing weight, they're actually wanting to restructure their body, and they want to change the way it looks. And it should never be about weight. Muscle and fat are totally different in terms of density. muscle weighs more than fat. So it should be about what your body is composed of and not how much you weigh. And this is the reason why I think body recomposition is the way forward. It should be a combination of doing compound movements, isolation movements, and cardio. That should be what it should be, an all over approach to get the most out of it. Because one of the times that you burn the most fat is actually when you're doing nothing. You've got to think that, you know, if you eat and you have this insulin spike and you take that energy away, and after a while you'll that insulin spike will dull and you'll start to burn fat just by sitting around doing nothing. And that's called your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. That's what if you were to sit around and do nothing all day, that's what you burn. And the way to increase that BMR is by increasing your lean muscle mass. So it seems strange to me that you wouldn't do any form of weight training or strength training to supplement the cardio for weight loss. And it just seems like cutting off your nose to spite your face almost. Like you're not doing, you're taking out a key component that's going to help. And if you're a woman and you're worried about getting bulky, that's not going to happen. You don't have the right hormones to get bulky. And in terms of muscle growth and like hypertrophy, testosterone is a key thing, especially for men. And you don't have the same testosterone levels. And I know that this might not necessarily be totally accurate, but men and women do have different hormone levels, and that is a big player in terms of muscle size and development. So for me, it should be, in my opinion, it should be that you do weight training and you do cardio, because the more lean muscle mass you have, the higher your BMR, and also the more energy you will burn when you do cardio. And when we have bigger muscles, we then need more energy. Therefore, if you have larger fat reserves, you're going to burn more of that fat just to do the exercises. So I think it's crucial that we weight train and do cardio. And it should be this all-encompassing approach. As well with diet. Like, they say not all calories are made equal, and that is true. Earlier I mentioned refined sugars, refined carbohydrates. These, for me, are the enemy. I try my very best not to consume that much sugar, at least refined sugar. Like natural sugars, I quite like maple syrup, which is, you could say it's processed, but it's a natural process. Or I eat fruit or vegetables. Like these are where I get my carbohydrates, my sugars from. I try my best to have, again, if I go for any kind of other carbohydrate, bread, I go normally for a sourdough, a whole wheat. Again, noodles or rice, I try and go for brown or whole wheat, because of the benefits of having that whole grain, and it's a better carbohydrate. That's the thing. When a lot of us, we sit and we binge eat and we eat chocolate and sugar, and like, there is a time and a place for that. And that's when we are burning a lot of extra calories. If you want to have those things, have them on the training days. But obviously, you need to maintain that calorie deficit. That is, again, something that's incredibly crucial. If you do not have that calorie deficit, then this lipolysis is not going to happen. Or at least not as effectively. We want to make sure that this process is happening. And the way to do that is it's calories in versus calories out, or energy in versus energy out, whichever way you want to look at it. So, just, I think something to remember is that I think a lot of people have always said that eat less, move more. And I think, although that's right, I think it's a little bit misleading at times. What I believe we should be saying, bearing in mind that not all calories are created equal, and that not all exercise necessarily is created equal, and also that we lose most of fat through exhaling, lose it as CO2, I think maybe we should, or maybe I'll start coining the phrase, eat right, move more, keep breathing. I hope you found this useful. Leave me a comment and like and subscribe, and stay strong, stay safe. Until next time.